might have heard of. The story of a girl named Brooke Skylar Richardson, who allegedly got pregnant while she was in high school. She carried out the pregnancy without telling anybody, and on the day of the birth, she killed her baby and then buried it in the backyard of her parents' house. This trial has picked up a lot of popularity over the past couple weeks because, one, it's been entirely televised and publicized. The judge was nice enough to allow cameras into the courtroom so that all of us can see this fiasco play out. But also, it is extremely reminiscent of the Casey Anthony case where the person obviously did it, but still got away with it. This case begged a lot of big questions, which is why I'm glad I put the extra effort and spent 2 whole days researching this, because there were a lot of things that didn't make sense. Like the first big question that I had was, how did she even hide her pregnancy from people that she knew?
Yeah, I'm sick.
Because, after a certain number of months, certainly you can hide a pregnancy for a couple months, but after about the 3rd or 4th month or so, you start showing. And it's not like she was overweight, she was a thin cheerleader, so it would have been very obvious. But her parents didn't even know. Well, her mother was the first person to find out. Her parents didn't even know until she was almost ready to give birth, and even then, she was able to deny that she was pregnant, and her mother believed her. Take a look at this photo. This is a picture of her in her prom dress just a few days before she gave birth to her daughter. If you'd shown me the picture of this and I didn't know she was pregnant, I would have said that she's not pregnant. She's very, very thin, and I forget the exact reason they gave for why she wasn't showing, but it was likely due to the fact that she's anorexic. In fact, it was so hard to tell that she was pregnant that she didn't even know until she went to the gynecologist to get some birth control only 11 days before the baby was delivered. And I actually believe her on this, despite the fact that I don't believe her on a lot, because if she knew she was pregnant and she decided that she wanted to kill a baby, it would be a crucial mistake to go to the doctor and notify them that you were pregnant, because that is how she ended up getting caught. What happened is that she went to the gynecologist to go get some birth control. During that gynecology visit, they gave her a pregnancy test. She tested positive for that. And then they asked her to come back in a few days, or however long it was, to get a follow-up appointment to determine how far along the baby was, but also to determine if the baby was healthy in the first place. One of the major points of contention in the case was if the baby was a stillbirth or not. And the problem with that is that the defense's only evidence that says it was a stillbirth is Brooke's own testimony. Brooke is an 18-year-old at this point, has really no medical knowledge about anything relating to children, yet she's able to diagnose her baby as stillborn and then bury the baby in the backyard. If she had gone back to the gynecologist and she'd come back for a second measurement, because that's how they determine the health of the baby, is they take an initial measurement at week 1, and they take a second measurement at week 2, and they compare based on what a healthy baby should look like. So if she had gone back and the gynecologist had determined the baby to be healthy, then she wouldn't have gotten away with the lie that the baby was stillborn. And I say it's a lie because if she actually cared about her child and she actually cared about her daughter like she claimed she did in the interviews, then she would have gone back for the follow-up appointment. If she actually cared about the child and was not trying to cover up a murder, when she found the child to be stillborn, like she told the police during the interrogation, when she found the child to be stillborn, then she would have called 911. She would have asked her parents for help. She would have done something to help save this baby's life in the case that the life could be saved. But she didn't do that. She went outside and buried the child and tried to pretend like nothing ever happened. Roughly 2 months after her first visit to the gynecologist where she was told she was pregnant, she goes to the same clinic but to a different doctor to get a refill on her birth control. Now, I initially thought this would be a really stupid idea to go back to the doctor after you just murdered a baby, but the idea was that she didn't want anybody to know that she was pregnant, and she had a boyfriend at the time. Imagine, she was on birth control, having unprotected sex with her boyfriend, and she all of a sudden runs out and now says that her boyfriend has to wear a condom. I think he would find that quite suspicious, so she had to go back to the gynecologist to get more birth control. So she goes to the same clinic that she went to the first time, Hilltop Obstetrics and Gynecology. She first spoke to a doctor named William Andrew, and next spoke to a female doctor, Casey Boyce. What Brooke didn't know is that before the appointment, the two gynecologists had talked to each other, and then William Andrew had informed her current doctor, Casey Boyce, that Brooke had been pregnant. So the doctor asked, well, hey, how's the baby? And she said this very lucid statement, oh, I had the baby, it was stillborn, and I buried it in my backyard, and I didn't tell anybody, and the only person who knows is you. Sounds a little psychotic, but that's what she said.
And did she give you any indication as to what happened to the child that she was pregnant with on April 26th?
Yes, she started sobbing, and she said, I had it alone in my house, and I buried it in my backyard.
After she said that to her doctor, they reported to the police, and then she got called in for an interrogation. So because of that, I don't think she actually knew that she was pregnant, or she wouldn't have told them. She was so insistent on not having anybody know that she was pregnant that she wouldn't have gone to the doctor and notified him that she was pregnant by getting that test. If she had known she was pregnant beforehand, she would have refused it, or she would have not shown up and just waited until the baby was born so she can get rid of it. Now, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of probably the majority of the YouTube audience who has viewed this case, it's all been very, very public. Like, you can go and view every single court hearing, you can view all the interrogations all online, which is great. Makes it really easy to investigate this stuff. But personally, I think she is completely guilty. However, in case you haven't seen the end results of this, she got acquitted of all of her major charges. She got acquitted of a murder charge, she got acquitted of an involuntary manslaughter charge, which were the two big things that she was worried about. I mean, she did get convicted of mutilation of a corpse, which I believe is a felony, but that's not nearly as bad of a charge as murder is. And her being acquitted of the major charges is really why I spent a ton of time trying to absorb as much about this case as possible. I listened to the interrogations, I listened to a lot of the trial, I listened to all of the data that I thought was essential, because I certainly didn't want to make a video condemning someone who may have been innocent. But despite the fact that I think she was guilty, she still won the case. And because she won the case, I'm going to talk about the defense first before I get into the prosecution. Because I want to discuss why I think she won and why I think her defense did actually a very, very good job. Both her lawyers were excellent, and I think especially the lawyer who gave the closing argument was phenomenal. I mean, if I committed a murder, I would definitely hire this guy.
And by the way, I believe Skylar has stillbirth. But what I have got to do, my job, is to explain the burden of proof. As the judge talked to us in Fort Dyer, about 100 people, and if 99 are guilty and 1 is innocent, our law, people have fought for this. Our soldiers have fought to keep us a free country for our Fifth Amendment rights. Our law would prefer to let all 100 go than to entrap an innocent. That's why we have this high burden of proof in criminal cases.
This guy is a master of public speaking. If anybody is interested in becoming a public speaker, or anybody is a public speaker and wants to become better, then I would highly recommend that you watch the closing argument, his entire, I think it's like a 45 minutes or an hour speech on why his client is not guilty. He does a phenomenal job at it. He's like making eye contact with the jury. He's got like a kind of an even voice. It's not too quiet. It's not too loud. It's very like friendly. Like, I'm just trying to help you out. Just make it so my client's not guilty. He gives lots of metaphors that are spot on and fantastic. Like, I swear, this guy isn't even real. He's like out of a movie or something like that. His arguments are too good. He's clearly had a lot of practice at this, compared to his opponents who just aren't on the same skill level of debate and of presentation. And this is something that's important to point out, because a lot of times people will win debates based on their skill level at debate and not based on the correctness of their arguments. I think a really good example of this is the whole debate between JonTron and Destiny that happened a couple of years ago, where Destiny gave a lot of really well thought out arguments about socialism and about things that are really abhorrent. And JonTron, though he had the correct idea, his presentation of those ideas are so terrible that nobody would have thought that the ideas were correct. But they started doing this thing where they were like, well, if you're black, you're here. If you're white, you're here. If you're, you know,
okay, so I would say that Jim Crow laws probably assigned white and black people to different areas more so than a Black Lives Matter speaker or Obama talking about a racial issue.
I just don't know that it's on the same level.
especially because...
Well, it's not. It's on a much lesser level than it used to be. We don't have Jim Crow laws anymore. We don't, women's suffrage happened,
You're right, and people still manage to create divisions between themselves.
Well, because there still exist divisions. Black people are disproportionately represented in prisons. Women are disproportionately represented in certain workplaces.
Okay, but the argument is that it's white people who caused them to be in those places. That's the implicit argument, not that they have any agency of their own to...
Who do you think was responsible for Jim Crow laws?
Well, of course it was white people, of course. I'm not arguing for Jim Crow.
Really?
Well, I mean, if you go back 50 to 100 years, yeah, it was kind of white people that did it. Now, I'm not saying that we need to lock white people up now or bring back reparations or anything, but...
They say you want to have a conversation, but they don't really want to have a conversation. They just want to blame whites more and more.
Now, let me just quickly respond to this, because this is an argument that leftists give a lot. Japan was war-torn in the 1940s. They got nuked.
Yeah.
They had all their crap burned. People were starving.
Up.
People had
America
crapped
crapped in their fridge,
after that
bro.
war.
They did.
A handful of years later, certainly a lot less time than it's been from now to back to the Civil War in America, a handful of years later, Japan is one of the world's greatest economies.
Yeah.
There are many people who come from terrible situations yet manage to find success. In fact, coming from a terrible situation tends to be a pretty big motivator for working hard. Now, why that's not happening in these specific communities that Destiny mentioned, probably welfare. But that's a topic for another day. And this is just here to show you how wrong you can look when you're less skilled at debate than your opponent is. But let's get back to Brooke's case. And I guess at this point, for clarity, I'll start using their actual names. The main lawyer that you see for the defense, the one who gives the closing argument, is named Charlie Rickers. The next lawyer I'm going to show you is the first lawyer that gives the closing argument for the prosecution. There's actually two prosecuting lawyers. Her name is Julie Kraft. And as I play this clip, take a second to look at the skill difference as a presenter between Charlie Rickers and Julie Kraft. It's quite noticeable. Even if I don't play them back to back, you can tell who's more skilled.
Having a child that was the result of a less than 1 month casual relationship was not part of her perfect life. So Brooke kept her secret. A secret that she knew had the ability to destroy her perfect life and all of the plans that she had made. A secret that would forever alter her relationships with the two people that mattered most to her, her mom and Brandon.
Look at how she gives her presentation compared to the defense. When Charlie Rickers gave his presentation for the defense, he was, again, calm, collected. He made eye contact with the audience, and he looked like he really knew what he was talking about. Versus when the prosecutor, Julie Kraft, gives her presentation, she's like reading off the script, and she's looking up and down, not really making eye contact, doesn't seem as sure. And I think this is one of her more crucial mistakes, because when she gives her presentation to the jury, she sounds like she's attacking them. She's like, you better believe that this chick is guilty, versus the defense, who's nice and friendly. Who are you going to go with, the friendly person or the person who attacks? And I think the second prosecutor, Stephen Nippen, makes the same mistake as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, shortly after murdering her daughter, placing her lifeless body in the dirt behind their home, Brooke Richardson sent 2 elated text messages to her mother that both contained the phrase, "My belly is back. My belly is back."
Why, dude?
Ladies and gentlemen, that belly was her child. That belly was her daughter. A daughter with fingers and toes, with hair on her head. A child that she tossed into the dirt and didn't even have the decency to wrap her in a blanket to show at least some semblance of respect for that baby girl.
And I point this all out because oftentimes when people don't know how to determine what the facts are, they will often rely on the person's demeanor. I mean, look at what people do with presidency. They don't know about politics, so what they say is, well, Obama is a very calm and collected politician, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, versus Trump, who they say sounds like a fucking idiot. In fact, that's not the only time the left has done that. When George Bush was president, George Bush Jr., they said he was a bumbling idiot, versus when Bill Clinton was president, he was the best orator on the planet. this demeanor matters, and it certainly matters, I think, a lot to women. And I point that out because the majority of the jurors were female, 7 women versus 5 men. And I think a big part of the defense narrative was a narrative that would more suit women. A big part of the defense was that Brooke Skylar Richardson was just a helpless child, and she was being oppressed by these evil policemen. Now, there's a couple examples of her giving that childlike demeanor, but I think the best is when she gets the verdict. So take a look at this.
Will the defendant please rise? With regard to count 1, we, the jury, in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of aggravated murder, and there appear to be 12 jury signatures affixed. Verdict form 2, involuntary manslaughter. We, the jury, in the above captioned case, do hereby find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of involuntary manslaughter. Count 3, child endangerment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, not guilty of child endangerment. It does say we further find the defendant did not cause serious physical harm to the alleged victim, but that finding is not necessary as a matter of law. Verdict form number 4, we, the jury, in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, guilty of the offense of abuse of a corpse. Ladies and gentlemen, are those the verdicts of the jury? Yes, sir. You may be seated. All right, again, you are now discharged from all your service. Does either side wish to have the jury polled? No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you will now be returned to the jury room. Thank you for your service. Mr. Mullins is going to give you back your phones and such, and I will see you in a couple of minutes.
Please shut up. You are so lucky. I understand. You suffer no consequences. Yeah?
Right from the beginning, you can see her helpless demeanor. I mean, not only does she look scared and nervous, she kind of looks like shit. She kind of looks like she's been through a harsh winter or something, and that's likely due to her anorexia. Anorexia will make you lose your hair, and it looks like she's losing a little bit of her hair on her, well, it'd be our left side, but her right side. It makes you look older. I've seen a couple people who are anorexic who are in their 20s who look like they're in their 70s. And she's certainly, someone in the comments section of one of the videos says she looks like she's in her 40s. I certainly agree with that. She looks a lot older than she actually is. I mean, look by comparison. Here's a photo of her in the trial.
I want him caught this time.
And here's a photo of her in high school when she was a cheerleader. These photos are only a couple years apart. So she looks terrible, she looks panicky, she's crying, she's just this poor, helpless little kid. So you get the victim narrative that goes very well with women right away. I mean, they even push that when they're talking to the police officers about how they searched her room. They showed a picture of her bedroom looking perfectly clean, and then they showed after the search where it looks super dirty, and the defense lawyer, Charlie Rickers, says, Did you clean it up? Did you put it all back? And the cop says, no. And then the assumption was like, well, how terrible is that? You messed up her room, you fucked everything up, and you didn't even clean it up. You're ruining the life of this poor, helpless victim. And she even plays the victim card very, very well during her police interrogation. In fact, if I didn't know better, if I didn't know what I know now, and I was doing this 10 years ago, I would have completely believed her.
I'm sorry.
How are you doing? I have to step out for just a second, okay?
The hell is this?
In just a minute, but I've got to step out just real quick. Phone call now.
I'm going to stay in here with you, okay? I don't know, okay? I'm in here observing you. No. You're not understanding. No, what I'm not going to. Just relax, okay? Listen, just relax, okay? I don't want to go to jail. I know you don't. Just relax, okay? Listen, I understand that you're sorry. I understand that you're upset. I understand that you don't want this to happen, okay? Just take some deep breaths, okay? Things will be okay. I don't want to go to jail. You're not going to jail. Okay, we're not taking you to jail today. You're not going to jail, okay? what's gonna happen. Honey, I don't know. This isn't my case, okay? He's talking. He just wants to get some things straightened up so that we can figure out exactly what happened.
What is this? What a bullshit this is.
Now that we've seen her little performance, let me introduce you to somebody named Dahlia DiPolito. You might know her from a case that happened a very long time ago where she called in a hit on her husband. The way this story starts is that she had a one-night stand with a guy named Mohammed Shahadi. During the time that she knew him, she had asked him how to hire someone to put a hit out on her husband. So Mohammed pretty much immediately went to the police with this information, and they had asked him to be an informant and try to help them catch her in the act of attempting to hire a hitman to kill her husband. So he said yes to that, and the great thing is that they caught it all on tape. Now, part of this ruse is that they had to convince her that her husband was dead. So after she had given the guy a bunch of money to go buy a gun and told the guy that she was 5,000% sure that she wanted her husband dead, they had come to her house and had told her that her husband is dead, and this is how she responded.
It's a great performance. A newlywed in tears after being told her husband has just been found murdered. But those are crocodile tears. Dahlia DiPolito has fallen into a trap. The hitman she hired to carry out the murder was actually an undercover cop. Dahlia played the grieving widow for all it was worth.
Or a more interesting thing would be to look at her interrogation. Now I ask you, does this look a little familiar?
You're going to jail today for solicitation of murder. You're under arrest. That's an undercover police officer. We filmed everything that you did. Recorded everything that you did. You're going to jail for solicitation of first-degree murder of your husband. Did you hear what I just told you?
I heard you.
Everything, listen to me. Everything has been recorded. You were photographed in the convertible when you sat in his car in the front of CBS. What do you want to do? What do you want to do here? Dahlia, listen to me.
I didn't do anything.
You're going to jail.
You did.
I got word that the chopper's
You didn't do anything. You're going to jail today.
Let's go.
They're going to come in here
Already.
and take you to the Palm Beach County Jail, book you for solicitation of first-degree murder on your husband. Your husband is well alive. Oh, yeah, thank God. No, he doesn't want to see you.
He just got out of sight.
He doesn't want to see you.
Let's go.
Listen to me. I want you to quit your acting and get this over with. Yes, you are. Okay. You know what? You need a real good attorney.
Now, as you're watching this next clip, I want you to think about how she acted during the interrogation and how she acted when she found out that her husband was dead.
His mom is not going to get suspicious of you or anything like
Why
that.
me? But you know what?
To say that.
Nobody's gonna be able to point a finger at me.
And shortly afterward, gives him a photo of Mike.
Wipe my on top of this picture. Really? You're gonna give him some fingerprints all over?
Quite a different demeanor, isn't it? I mean, this chick was absolutely outright arrogant. She was so arrogant that when she got booked and she used her phone call, she called her husband the guy who she tried to kill, and she tried to get him to help her. I'll leave the phone conversation in the description as well as all of the other relevant clips. But during this phone conversation, she pulls one of my favorite lines that any abusive female manipulator will use. And if you've listened to this channel long enough, you've probably heard me say this multiple times. But she pulls on the guy she tried to murder. She pulls a variant
That's beautiful.
of, I do so much for you, but you never do anything for me.
Why say that to me?
That's all abusive.
Why should I? Because you know me. Okay, whenever you need me, I am there for you, period. You know that.
I'm there to kill you, bro.
Or am I not? I couldn't
Obviously.
get off the couch the other day, and I came, and I brought you dinner, and I this, and I that, and I always make sure you're always there. You're always everything. I never, ever in my wildest dreams ever want that for you, ever.
Now, to give credit credit where credit is due, I always like to have things make sense. I like to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And to me, it doesn't make sense that this perfectly innocent guy would just end up with a cruel murderer who is a complete sociopath. And with a little research, with a little effort, and a little help, I found out the rest of the story. Turns out that Mike DiPolito, the guy who had his wife try to kill him, was a convicted scam artist. So nobody's ever really innocent here. When you're in relationships, you pick the people who you deserve. And, in the case of Brooke Richardson, when you parent, you get the kids you deserve. But I mention this because just like Dahlia, Brooke is extremely arrogant after the crime. After her baby was dead, the next day she sends a text to her mom talking about how great her belly's going to look and that her belly is back. This is compounded with the fact that she basically shows no remorse for her supposedly stillborn child. I've had at least 5 people in my life who have experienced stillbirths, and every single one of them was devastated by the stillbirth. Brooke constantly tries to refer to the baby as it, as opposed to her, as opposed to recognizing it as an actual human life. And the only time she is really genuinely emotional and genuinely crying is when she's afraid because she doesn't want to go to jail. I think she very effectively uses this fear of going to jail to pull out a very believable cry. And then during the reaction to the interrogation with her parents, she does at least twice do some very manipulative acts. One, she says, "Can I please hold your hand, Mommy?" And 2, she says, "Will you always love me?"
Can I please hold your hand, Mommy? I'm sorry. Can you please hold my ideas from my body right now? I'm sorry. I just...
Honey, please stop. That doesn't help. You did a horrible thing.
I didn't kill her.
You got pregnant. You had a baby in our house and you never told us.
I got it.
Yes, you should have. Do you understand how much worse this is than that would have been? That's what we're trying to grasp. Because we were thinking that we were trying to do the things that were right for you, and they went horribly wrong.
Will you always love me?
Yes, I will always love you.
No.
Forever.
Some people need to hear that people won't love them.
When she does this, she's trying to test if her parents believe her, or she's trying to guilt her parents into believing her. And by the way, don't think for a second that I would ever let the parents off the hook for this situation. The parents are just as bad as she is because they raised a daughter who would do such a thing. Once during the interrogation, she says that she has a good relationship with her parents.
But they're gonna love you no matter what, and they're gonna help you from here on out, okay? Yeah. Yes, they're good parents. They will help me. You have a good relationship with your mom? Pretty good. Yeah. What about your dad?
Yeah, you don't.
He's very supportive. We don't know that much. We're not as close as me and my mom. Yeah.
Now, when she says that, whether she knows it or not, that is an outright lie. If you have a good relationship with your parents, you don't become anorexic. If you have a good relationship with your parents, you don't have unprotected sex and get pregnant. And especially, if you have a good relationship with your parents, you don't become so afraid of telling them that you're pregnant that you have a baby entirely in secret in the middle of the night. Give birth by yourself with 0 medical attention. Now, keep in mind, she may not have known this, but in the past, birth without medical attention was a major cause of death. A lot of women died in the past because of childbirth. So she does that by herself. She goes through all the pain of childbirth. She buries her dead daughter. She has to bury a corpse. She has to get rid of all of the evidence in the middle of the night. Yet she has a good relationship with her parents. No, she doesn't. And that is their fault. So they are not innocent in this situation either. Which brings me to the prosecution. And the judge at the very end of the sentencing says something that I found really interesting.
Life is precious, and it should be protected, and it should be guarded in all respects. And I have reviewed all of the expert reports in this case. I listened to the expert's testimony. I firmly believe, Ms. Richardson, in fact, I know in my heart that if you would have made different decisions in this case, Annabelle would be here today. And I know that might be difficult for you to hear. Some people are inclined to think to themselves, this is America. We kill unborn babies every day. But I don't look at it that way, Ms. Richardson. And the law does not allow me to consider the acts that you took prior to giving birth. But I think that your choices before birth, during birth, and after show a grotesque disregard for life. And I think when I look at this case, that to me is what offends the community sensibilities. But because of policy decisions that are beyond my purview, the jury was not permitted to consider those things, and neither am I. So I don't hold those things against you in the sentencing.
In all honesty, I think the judge believes that she is guilty. However, he and the jury could not act on that belief because of the laws that have to do with abortion. And there are some things that she did which could not be